Hi, everybody. Module 4. Welcome to Module 4. It's focused on culturally responsive classrooms within the school. As the demographics of our schools and classrooms continue to evolve, so must our teaching practices. As a result, the educator or instructional leader must lead in developing culturally responsive classrooms for effective teaching and learning. Here are the objectives for Module 4. First, examine the role of the culturally responsive educational leader or educator in meeting the needs of all students. And second, describe how a culturally responsive leader or educator can improve teaching or learning. And my own journey with being a culturally responsive educator has been kind of a journey of discovery, I guess we'll say. If you were to come into my classroom, especially the first several years that I taught, I was pretty proud of how my classroom was set up. I was a high school teacher for most of my career, and I was proud of myself for having bulletin boards in my classroom. They weren't, they weren't necessarily neat and tidy like bulletin boards in elementary schools, but I had them. But if you really looked at how my classroom was set up, it mirrored me. If you looked at the books that I had in my classroom, and I had lots of books in my classroom, and I prided myself on, lending the books out to kids if they wanted to check them out, and many of them did, but they were written by people that looked like me, middle class white dudes, upper class white dudes. I'm not necessarily upper class in that way, but upper middle class. If you looked at the pictures on the walls, they were people that looked like me, but dead white guys. I had pictures of dead white guys on my walls. And so my classroom represented my views on things, and especially from the framework of history. And how did I teach the framework of history? I taught it from the perspective of, the white folks that advanced across the prairies, and so while it was a very traditional approach to things, it didn't necessarily take into account every single student that existed in my classroom. And I taught in small districts, and you might think there's not a lot of diversity in small districts, and so maybe it doesn't matter that much. But there's a thread of underlying diversity in a lot of those districts, and the more culturally responsive that your own classroom is, the more freedom that students will feel in that classroom to be themselves. And so maybe diversity isn't as overt in a smaller school setting. Black, white, Hispanic, a lot of times rural areas in Missouri especially tend to be mostly white folks. But there is, again, underlying diversity. What if you have gay kids? What if you have lesbian kids? What if you have, potentially trans kids? There's a lot of things that can happen, and there's a lot of diversity that can be potentially present. So how do you represent that? How do you become culturally responsive to the needs of your able-bodied students and the students that might not have abilities that other students have? And these are all things to think about. And I did a better job toward the end of my time in public education at that than I did at the beginning. But I don't know that I ever did what one would consider a good job at doing those things. So I am hopeful that you will be better than me, much better than me, at addressing the needs of being culturally responsive in your own classrooms, because that's how students feel truly safe and able to engage with you. So having said all that, I'm off script, sorry, but having said all that, there are two assignments in this module. The first one is the discussion. You've done them before, you've done a nice job with them. Just remember to post your initial discussion by Wednesday and respond to two classmates by Sunday. The assignment project then for this module is to develop a culturally responsive plan for your classroom. Again, I think I've cleaned up the administrator-friendly language in this module to reflect maybe more of your own experience as classroom educators. If something comes across again and you're not understanding what I'm asking, just get a hold of me and we'll figure it out. But in the end, or in the long run, how can you be a more culturally responsive educator to make sure that you're representing more views than just your own in your classroom? And that's the gist of being a culturally responsive educator, and making your space safe for everybody that's in there. If you have questions, dimmitt@nwmissouri.edu. My preference is that you go through Canvas, because then I see it in a couple of different ways. My real preference is that you would text me if you have any questions, 660-254-4424. Take care, everybody, and have a great week.